All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at a period in English history that was just so chaotic, so violently destructive, that chroniclers at the time literally threw their hands up and named it the Anarchy. It's a sprawling, dramatic story. Think stolen crowns, shifting alliances, and a decades-long civil war between two royal cousins fighting for the ultimate prize. And the crazy thing, it all started with one disastrous, drunken shipwreck in 1120 that completely dismantled an entire kingdom's future.
Picture this. It's a freezing, pitch-black night, November 25th, 1120. Roughly 300 passengers are boarding the ill-fated White Ship. You've got King Henry I of England and his massive royal entourage getting ready to sail from Normandy back across the English Channel. Crucially, his 17-year-old son, William Adelin, the sole legitimate male heir to the English throne, is on this boat, along with a huge party of nobles. But, well, there's a stark contrast between the freezing weather outside and the vibe on deck. The group had been drinking heavily for hours, and these raucous, drunken celebrations just kept right on going as they boarded.
So what happens? The ship barely makes it out of the harbor before, bam, it strikes a submerged rock, tears the hull wide open. Out of those 300 passengers, there was only one single survivor, a butcher from Rouen who literally clung to the freezing wreckage. This unimaginable tragedy plunged the royal succession into a completely unprecedented crisis. With young William drowned, King Henry I is suddenly left without a legitimate male heir. He spends the next 15 agonizing years desperately trying to secure the throne for his only remaining legitimate child, his daughter, Matilda. But, as we're going to see, convincing headstrong medieval lords to accept a female ruler, that was a nearly impossible task.
Matilda was basically facing an unbreakable medieval glass ceiling. The English barons were handed an impossible choice between the true designated heir and her charming cousin. See, Matilda absolutely had the royal bloodline, but she'd been living far away in Germany, ruling as the Holy Roman Empress. The English lords didn't really know her. And frankly, they were deeply prejudiced against the very idea of taking orders from a female military leader. On the flip side, you have Stephen of Blois, Henry's nephew. Stephen was male. He was physically present in the region. He was a wealthy count in northern France. And man, he knew exactly how to win over the nobility with his charm. So the moment King Henry finally dies, the stage is perfectly set for a massive, opportunistic betrayal.
And Stephen didn't waste any time. While Matilda was heavily pregnant and completely stuck in Anjou, Stephen moved with lightning speed, seizing the crown in just 3 weeks. So after King Henry supposedly dies from eating way too many lampreys, which, by the way, are these weird jawless fish, Stephen races across the English Channel. He secures the royal treasury in Winchester and sweet-talks the Archbishop of Canterbury into crowning him king. Matilda is geographically isolated, recovering from a tough pregnancy, and can only watch from afar as her cousin blatantly steals her birthright. It took some time to build up her forces, but by 1138, her fiercely loyal supporters rallied, and full-scale civil war officially erupted across England. But listen, this wasn't just your standard run-of-the-mill medieval war. It was the Anarchy. We're talking about a terrifying, total breakdown of royal power where rogue lords just tore the countryside apart for personal gain. With two rival monarchs fighting tooth and nail, local barons quickly figured out, hey, we can play both sides against the middle here. They started illegally building these heavy stone castles to cement their own regional power, swapping out the older, vulnerable wooden structures. As these warlords flexed their dominance, agriculture was ruined, villages were mercilessly sacked, and the common people suffered immensely. The entire country practically fractured into lawless, heavily fortified mini-territories. Then we get to 1141, which turns into this wild, high-stakes game of ping-pong. The two sides actually managed to capture each other's top leaders and were forced into a massive, honestly kind of embarrassing prisoner swap. At the Battle of Lincoln, Empress Matilda's forces pulled off the unthinkable. They captured King Stephen himself. For a second there, it really seemed like the war was over. But Stephen's wife, who, just to make history super confusing, was also named Matilda, rallies his demoralized troops and strikes back fiercely at the Rout of Winchester. She captures Empress Matilda's top general and half-brother, Robert of Gloucester. The result? A perfectly balanced stalemate. Both sides were forced to just trade their high-value prisoners and keep right on fighting. Now, right before she lost her iron grip on power during that crazy year of 1141, Matilda claimed a really fascinating uncrowned title. It shows just how tantalizingly close she got to shattering the norms of medieval rulership. When she actually had Stephen in chains, she marched triumphantly on London to finally be crowned queen. but the citizens of London violently rejected her, forcing her to flee before the coronation could even happen. Since she was never formally anointed at Westminster Abbey, she boldly adopted the title Domina Anglorum, Lady of the English. It was this stark, powerful reminder of just how unprecedented her claim to power really was.
Okay, you absolutely have to hear about this next part. Later in 1141, Matilda's luck takes a turn, and she finds herself totally surrounded by Stephen's marauding forces at Devizes Castle. Any normal escape attempt on horseback would have meant instant capture, probably death. So, showing absolutely incredible nerve, she orchestrates one of history's most cinematic escapes. She disguises herself in burial wrappings, has her loyal attendants tie her tightly to a wooden funeral bier, and literally gets carried out straight through enemy lines posing as a corpse. I mean, wow, it worked flawlessly, and the Lady of the English lived to fight another day. And not to be outdone by her own previous escape, in 1142 she pulls off another incredibly daring move. King Stephen had trapped her inside Oxford Castle for over 2 months, and the food supplies were completely gone. So what does she do? In the dead of a freezing December night, Matilda and a handful of loyal knights silently climbed down the towering castle walls on ropes. Dressed head to toe in white linens, they used the blizzard as winter camouflage, blending perfectly into the heavy falling snow. They slip right past Stephen's freezing, unsuspecting guards and walk for miles across the ice to safety. It's this sheer, unyielding instinct for survival that kept her cause alive. By the mid-1140s, though, the dynamics of the war really start to shift. It evolves from this rapid series of dramatic captures and escapes into an exhausting, bloody stalemate that gets passed down to an entirely new generation. England basically splits in two geographically. Matilda holds the west, Stephen holds the east. Meanwhile, Matilda's husband, Geoffrey, successfully focuses his efforts on conquering the Duchy of Normandy over in France. On top of that, the Second Crusade calls a ton of seasoned fighters away to the Holy Land, completely draining the region's military resources. As Matilda and Stephen age and grow weary, they hand these grueling campaigns down to their ambitious teenage sons, Matilda's son Henry and Stephen's son Eustace. Eventually, everyone just had enough of the endless bloodshed. The rival heirs realized a military victory was impossible, so they negotiated a pragmatic agreement that would change English history forever. By 1153, Matilda's son Henry arrives in England with a fresh, aggressive army. At the exact same time, King Stephen is struck by tragedy. He's mourning the sudden death of his own heir, Eustace. The barons on both sides, who are utterly sick of the endless destruction and economic ruin, basically go on strike. They refuse to fight any more pitched battles. They literally force the two exhausted sides to the negotiating table at Wallingford to finally put an end to 19 years of pure misery. Now, Empress Matilda never got to officially be Queen of England, but through this brilliant treaty, she secures the ultimate victory. She ensures her son will inherit the entire kingdom. The terms of the Treaty of Wallingford were a total masterclass in compromise. Stephen was allowed to save face, he got to keep the crown for the rest of his natural life. But in exchange, he formally disinherits his remaining children and legally adopts Matilda's son, Henry Fitz-Empress, as his sole, undisputed heir. When King Stephen dies just a year later from a stomach ailment, Henry peacefully ascends to the throne as King Henry II, completely fulfilling his mother's lifelong mission.
There's this powerful epitaph on her tomb that reads, "Great by birth, greater by marriage, greatest in her offspring. Here lies Matilda, the daughter, wife, and mother of Henry." It really proves that her relentless survival established the legendary Plantagenet dynasty, which ruled England for centuries. Following the treaty, Matilda retired to Normandy, acting as a deeply respected senior advisor to her son. She never wore the crown, but make no mistake, she won the war. Her bloodline went on to include famous monarchs like Richard the Lionheart and King John, and the family name she brought from her marriage to Geoffrey of Anjou, Plantagenet, would sit securely on the English throne all the way down to the late 1400s.
So what's the ultimate takeaway from all this chaos? Well, this disastrous civil war actually accidentally weakened the crown. It empowered the barons and planted the very first seeds of modern constitutional governance. The anarchy wasn't just some petty family squabble over a sunken ship. It fundamentally shifted the entire balance of political power in England. Because both Stephen and Matilda had to constantly bribe, flatter, and negotiate with the barons just to secure their loyalty, the absolute, unquestioned power of the monarch was permanently fractured. It set a hard precedent of lords dictating terms to kings, a massive structural change that eventually paved the way for vital democratic institutions like Parliament.
And it leaves us pondering a massive historical what if. If that glass ceiling hadn't been there, could Matilda have been one of England's greatest rulers? Think about it. She proved herself to be resilient, highly cunning, and fiercely determined. Those are qualities that were universally praised in male kings, but often condemned as prideful or tyrannical in a woman. If she had simply been accepted as the legitimate heir her father intended, England might have been completely spared 2 decades of ruin. It's a fascinating, lingering question about gender, power, and the double standards of history. What do you think? I highly encourage you to keep exploring this one on your own.